Welcome to Media Representation Week. Every day this week, a new video will be released detailing our examinations of the most popular media in the West and displaying how certain groups are super abundantly overrepresented in our supposedly meritocratic system. For all these videos, we encourage you to examine the data for yourself. A link to the spreadsheet for each will be available in the video description. If you have any questions about our methodology, please reference the FAQ, also available in the description. If you find any error in any of our spreadsheets, please email me at leatherapronchan@gmail.com. Include a quality source to back up your claim, and I will update the spreadsheet accordingly. To finish off Media Representation Week, we took a look at Russell Brand in his podcast, Stay Free, in which 20.68% of his guests are Jewish. This means that Jewish individuals are about 8.5 times overrepresented on Brand's show, which technically makes it the least Jewish show we have examined. But as was the case with Peterson, we should remember that these overrepresentation figures are based on US numbers, wherein 2.5% of the population is Jewish. If we use the UK figures where Brand is based out of, then Jews are only 0.5% of the population, meaning they are about 40 times overrepresented on his show. Now this is almost certainly an overestimate since Brand doesn't have on only guests from the UK, but it does show that 8.5 times overrepresentation figure is, if anything, a low-end estimate, and it's probably much higher. Now, we wanted to take a look at Russell Brand specifically because, even more so than with Tim Pool, he sells himself as a political outsider and a free thinker, somebody who is against the zeitgeist of woke moralizing and all that. Frankly, before making this spreadsheet, a large part of me had hoped that we could find just a single instance of a popular political podcast in which this phenomenon wasn't present. And you can perhaps see why I was so hopeful. Brand is a guy who talks about real issues like big pharma, big tech, and censorship. And he's willing to talk about things that would get you kicked off a platform like YouTube, like his problems with the COVID vaccine.
Later, of course, we're going to be talking about the rise of 30% in death by heart attack in young people, which we cannot talk about on YouTube because by some weird coincidence, by some weird conspiracy theory, Google are regulated by the WHO, nominally and electively.
But much like with Tim Pool, we still see that Jewish guests are massively overrepresented. And as far as we can tell, these hosts aren't doing this on purpose. Brand doesn't intentionally shun white or black guests in favor of Jewish ones. It's seemingly how it just all shakes out. But then this brings up a deeper question for us all to consider. What does this say exactly about the lay of our media landscape? Throughout Media Representation Week, I've seen many people in the video comments excusing the high levels of Jewish overrepresentation that our studies have observed by pointing out that they're only overrepresented on these shows because they are overrepresented more generally in academia and politics, and these are the pools from which these shows draw their guests. And therefore, our observations are merely symptoms downstream of this larger reality. Now, of course, I can't say for sure whether or not Jews really are overrepresented in these fields or not. I haven't done that study. But if it is true, it begs the question, why are they overrepresented in those fields? My study has suggested the existence of a propensity towards ethnic preference. See part 3 of this video series for a fuller explanation on that. Could not the same situation be happening elsewhere? I'm not claiming this to be the case, but one must wonder. I would hope that a dispassionate study could be conducted on this question in order to get to the bottom of it before we jump to any conclusions. Now to address another rebuttal of sorts. Many people will argue that this overrepresentation is not an issue, since these people don't all share the same political agendas. Some of these individuals are even at odds with one another. So this must completely disprove the possibility of some sort of top-down conspiracy or any other such nefarious thing they think I might be implying. Now this argument is all fine and good, if a little specious, since I don't think that you could prove that these people don't share similar feelings, especially in their more foundational beliefs. But I'm not making that claim anyhow. The two problems that I have with this rebuttal are as follows. Number one, if we're all to be treated like individuals, then why is it a problem, according to the New York Times, when whites are overrepresented in positions of power? If anything, at least according to United States voting data, white people are the most likely to differ ideologically from one another. So whites presumably represent an even wider set of beliefs than most other ethnic groups, and would therefore presumably be the best equipped to represent people of all races within these positions of power. But for some reason, I don't think these facts would make the New York Times retract their article. So I must wonder what their next objection would be. If they still do object to 80% of the people in these positions of power being white, then they must think, for whatever reason, that people of different ethnicities think differently. If a white person cannot speak for a black person, it has to be another black person representing them, then what does this say about the data brought to light in our studies? As a corollary to this idea, I'm always disturbed by the skill with which these people can switch back and forth between addressing people as groups and addressing them as individuals. Now, I won't get too deep into this question, but it does seem to me to be the case that whenever somebody who is a part of a protected or media-favored group does something negative, it is always cast as an individual action, that has no negative bearing on the group that they come from. Yet if that same individual were to do something positive, or something that can be construed as positive, then it is cast as a group action that should reflect positively on the group that he came from. And of course, the exact opposite scenarios can occur, depending on how the narrative is spun. I hope you all catch my meaning. Moving on, I would like to address a flaw in another common rebuttal that I hear made against this study. Detractors will argue that Jewish hosts overrepresenting Jewish guests is fine and natural. After all, blacks who host podcasts tend to overrepresent other blacks, and nobody seems to care. Now, I haven't done that study to determine if black hosts really do overrepresent other blacks, but at a cursory glance, I can see why they're making that assumption, so let's assume it's true. This suggests that black individuals have an ethnic preference for other blacks, and we all seem to be okay with that. So then when Jewish individuals overrepresent other Jews, does this also mean that they are displaying an ethnic preference? Well, according to their argument, not at all. Jews are just overrepresented because they are way smarter. They have a higher IQ. In short, if black guests are overrepresented on black shows because of an ethnic preference, then it's silly to assume that the same isn't happening for Jews. Now, I will stop here. I know that many of you probably hoped that I would draw more of my own conclusions from this study, indeed more than I already have, but that was never its intention. I've said it many times now. I simply want these videos to serve as a conversation starter, to point out a fact that to many is all too obvious, yet that social pressure prevents us from discussing. People feel unable to point out that the emperor has no clothes for fear of social reprisals or what have you. And I would like nothing more than to see that fear in the face of truth removed entirely from our societies. Thank you all very much for watching our video and our entire Media Representation Week series. If you missed any of the parts, I will include a link to a playlist in the top right corner of the video, as well as in the video description. Thank you all very much.